My reign as a Jeopardy champion lasted almost 35 minutes.
This was coming like the waiting room of the vasectomist, and I know that's not what he's called. I know there's like a fancy word, but...
If you leave, I have nothing left to live for. The summer in between my junior and senior year of high school, I went to work at a sleepaway camp in Georgia as a CIT, which is a counselor in training, which basically combines the worst aspects of being a camper with the worst aspects of being a counselor, and I hated it. And I wanted to go home, and I called home, and my parents reminded me that I could accomplish anything I put my mind to, and I was like, oh, right. So I agreed to stay, and I knew that I needed something to get me through the summer, and I decided what I needed was a boyfriend, and I looked around at the other CITs and decided that boy was gonna be my boyfriend, and I don't remember his name all these years later, but I do remember the name of the girl he liked better than me. Her name was Leslie, and in my opinion, totally unbiased, she was terrible. And I decided it didn't matter that there was this other girl, I was still gonna have this guy as my boyfriend. And I did this like full court press of flirting for like 3 days, which in sleepaway camp time is like 12 years. And it was like really working because he like knew my name and there wasn't another Blakely there, so that was really awesome. And it was like going as planned. And so one night we ended up at the counselor's lodge, which is a fancy name for the cabin that only the counselors are allowed to be in. It was one of the only perks of being a CIT. We got to go. And it was really just a glorified smoking lounge because this was the 90s in Georgia and it didn't occur to anybody that you couldn't smoke at summer camp. You just couldn't do it when the kids were looking. So every night after the kids went to sleep, all the counselors would like make a beeline to go and light up. And so we're sitting up there and one of the counselors turns to the CITs and says, hey, do any of you guys want a cigarette? And the boy I had a crush on was like, yeah, I'll take one of those. And stupid stuck-up Leslie was all like, ew, no, cancer, bad. And I was like, this is my chance. And I agreed with her that, you know, cancer, bad as a general rule. And my parents certainly would have been disappointed in me, but they were the ones that talked me into staying. So fuck you, mom and dad. So I took the cigarette and I like took a drag and it was like, you know, the bag in the vacuum that's full of all the gritty, gray, grody, grimy stuff. It felt like somebody had just dumped that bag down my esophagus directly into my lungs. And but my head got like light and sparkly and I was like, cool, with the boy that was gonna be my boyfriend, and I got emboldened and I was like, hey, do you wanna go down by the tennis courts, which is like camp code for do you wanna make out by the tennis courts? And he was all like, yeah. And so we walked down and we made out and it was glorious. I mean, it was two like awkward teenagers in a muggy mosquito-filled Georgia night, but whatever. And the next morning I woke up and I had like a slightly scratchy throat, but I didn't care because I had a boyfriend and things were gonna be okay. And as the day went on, two things became abundantly clear. One, I did not have a boyfriend. And two, that scratchy throat actually turned into like a sore throat that was like swollen, and it was like the vengeance of an angry God for disobeying my parents. And as I walked myself down to the cafeteria, or to the infirmary that night, I was all like, you know, this is tragic because I should have a boyfriend to walk me to the infirmary. And the nurse was all like, hey, I took one look at this, you have tonsillitis and you have to have these antibiotics and you like have to be quarantined until the antibiotics take effect. And it was just as well because I was too humiliated to show my face anyway. And so 3 days later, which is like 12 years in sleepaway camp time, I was released back into Gen Pop, and it was worse than I'd even imagined. They were now boyfriend and girlfriend, and I was gonna have to stay the whole summer with like boyfriend and girlfriend. And that night, we were back up at the counselor's lodge again, and once again, a counselor said, hey, do you guys want a cigarette? And stupid stuck-up Leslie was like, you know, cancer. And that boy, who is now her boyfriend, was like, oh, no, thanks, because of course he has to say that. And I looked at the cigarettes, and I looked over at the boy who should have been my boyfriend. And for the first time in my life, I realized that maybe you can't accomplish anything you set your mind to. And maybe sometimes it doesn't matter if you're good enough or if you're smart enough or if you work hard. Sometimes you just lose. And that pain was worse than the pain of tonsillitis, and it was worse than the pain of an unrequited teenage crush, because that pain was the pain of growing up. And I said, yeah, I'll take that cigarette, and I smoked it, and it was terrible, and I hated it, and I finished it anyway.